Welcome to Higher Learning. I am your host, Oz Rashid. This is more than just a podcast. It's a front row seat to how elite leaders build the most iconic of teams. The kind of leaders who spot potential that others overlook, who build cultures people don't want to leave, who set the bar, then raise it. Work and how we work is evolving at a rapid pace like no time in history. Our guests will give you insights on how to stay out in front when it comes to all things talent, leadership, management, artificial intelligence, and developing the skills that actually matter. Whether you're a founder, hiring manager, or just obsessed with building teams the right way, this is your spot. If it's your first time here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button, drop a rating, tell a friend who gets it. To our longtime listeners, we appreciate you. Thanks for the continued support. Now, let's get into it. All right, listeners, my guest today started his hospitality career washing dishes at a Perkins in Pennsylvania. 25 years later, he's the chief operating officer at Davidson Hospitality Group. Jason Reeder worked his way up through Pyramid Hotel Group, ran operations at Magna, and was COO at Remington before Davidson came calling. Today, he oversees every operating vertical Davidson has: the hotels, the resort, Pivot, and the restaurant group. He has run properties across more than 20 lodging brands. He sits on advisory councils for Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt, and he holds a pilot's license, which tells you something about how he thinks about altitude. But here's what you really need to know about Jason. In his first year at Davidson, he stood up a general manager council so the people closest to the guest have a voice at the top. And he ends every message the same way. Stay hungry, stay humble. If you build teams for a living, pull up a chair, turn up the volume. We got a great show for you today. Jason, how you doing, buddy?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, man. I appreciate you making some time for us. Tell us, where are you based out of?
So Davidson's based in Atlanta, Georgia. So I am live here in our corporate office in Atlanta. For those of you who know Atlanta, we're in the perimeter area. If you're familiar with Atlanta.
Perimeter area, Atlanta, great city, great food, lots of huge businesses, Fortune 500 companies. Traffic, not the best, but they're working on that. You can't be perfect, so love it up there. Let's talk about it, man. I talked about it in the intro. I want to talk a little bit about Davidson so people get a sense of it. But you're the chief operating officer at Davidson Hospitality. We'll talk about Davidson in a second. I'm just interested. How did you get into the industry in the first place? Sounds like I mentioned it earlier. Dishwashing at Perkins. Was that your foray into hospitality, and you kept in that industry the entire time?
This is a crazy story. You know, they say truth is always stranger than fiction, right? But I wish I could tell you I had this grand master plan and I went to school for hospitality, but none of that is true. I went to, as you mentioned, I went to college at Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, and then I went to flight school at Emory Aviation College, was the name at the time, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where I do still have my pilot's license, although it's not current, as they say. It would technically be expired today, but I do still have the license. So I started washing dishes at Perkins in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Gosh, I think it was my summer of my freshman year in college.
7 years ago?
Yeah,
No?
fourscore. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So I can actually remember when my last day of dishwashing full time. It was a Saturday night, and this Perkins had what they call an A and B kitchen. So when you were fully staffed, you had 6 cooks on, and there were 3 call-offs that particular Saturday night. And I'm over there minding my business on the dish machine, and I hear this, Reeder, fryer. I'm like, what? It's a family show, but you can get your, you know what, on the fryer. Justin was his name. He was the wheel cook, the guy kind of in charge of the ordering. I was like, I don't know how to cook. It was like, you do now. Get your ass over here. So you get over the fryer. This is all you do. You put fries in the basket. You drop it down. You hit the timer, blah, blah, blah. So I then just became a fry cook. So fast forward. So I start out as, like I said, dishwasher. I did that for probably almost a year or so. Well, summers, in between school. And then became a fry cook, worked my way up to wheel cook, which is the one who calls out the orders. And then eventually became assistant manager, and eventually became GM of this restaurant. So I'm GM of this restaurant at, like, I don't know, 23, 24 years old. And this particular restaurant, is surrounded by 3 hotels. And now I'm not going to say they're great hotels. It was like a Days Inn, a Holiday Inn Express, and a Comfort Inn or something like that. And the GM of the Days Inn, which I will tell you was a really nice Days Inn, actually. They had a really nice ballroom, brick. It was I'll say, upscale. The GM comes over and says, hey, we just landed this incredible piece of business called Elder Hospital. I think it's actually called Rhodes Scholar now. And basically what it was if you liked history, funny enough how history comes back into play, but if you like history, you would basically pay one price, right? So, you would pay one price. It would include your hotels, your 3 meals, and then you would like tour the battlefield, learn about the Civil War, Battle of Gettysburg, all that stuff. And so the GM says, we'd like to host this group at your restaurant for breakfast. By the way, this group was 50 people, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. Nice piece of business, right? So I say, as this young, probably a little bit naive general manager, that's great. What about lunch and dinner? And Oz, I will tell you, the look on someone's face where they just like, they're like, kind of like, well, look, and they say, no offense, which by the way, whenever someone says no offense, something offensive is about to come.
100% of the
We
time.
will
Yeah.
not be serving Perkins food for lunch and dinner. We're going to do that in our ballroom. I mean, basically, Perkins isn't good enough for lunch and dinner. We can serve breakfast in your restaurant, but we cannot do lunch and dinner. We're going to have a private caterer, do in our ballroom, the whole thing. So I say, we don't have to serve Perkins food. Jim's like, what do you mean? I was like, we have a kitchen. You're 100 yards away. We can buy hot boxes. We can create our own menu. We can do lunch and dinner. I go back and forth with Joe Rancher for like 20 minutes. Finally, I'm like, just give us a chance. Like, let us participate in the process. So finally, they agree and say, all right, fine. You're in the running. Well, Oz, now I have a problem because I'm not a culinarian. I cooked at Perkins, but that doesn't qualify me
All right,
for a
does
menu
Perkins
planner.
give this type of leeway to their general manager? You're just
Well, by the
making
way,
on
I'll
the
get
fly
to that in a
menu
second.
changes?
I haven't asked anyone for permission yet, and I'll get to that part in a second. So now I'm like, I've got 2 weeks to come up with a menu, do the tasting. So the nicest restaurant in Gettysburg at the time, it probably still is, a restaurant called the Dobbin House. And I had a friend there who was a server we would go out and like drink and have a good time. So I go over and to see him. I said, hey, listen, and I explained kind of the situation. I said, I can't afford your chef or your sous chef. Do you have like an aspiring cook who's like creative? And he's like, yeah, I got just the guy. So he brings this guy out and I'm totally just like running with it, right? I have no really plan. And I kind of explained the situation. Hey, listen, we have 2 weeks. I'll pay you $5 more an hour than what you're making now. And I'll guarantee your job for 90 days. So if we don't win the business, you'll make $5 more than what you make now for 90 days. Give you time to find another job. But if we win the business, it's yours. Full creative control. You create the menus, you do the food. I honestly thought he was going to say no. He's like, yeah, sure, why not? So we join. I think you know kind of what the story goes. We win the business, right? So now I'm running 50 people in the restaurant every morning, 5 days a week, plus lunch and dinner at the restaurant. But I'm doing lunch and dinner catered in the hotel ballroom, right? I still haven't told anyone yet. I remember my boss, his name was Mike Brady. He calls me one day and says, hey, something's wrong with your numbers. You're up like 80% year over year. I was like, oh, that's weird. And I like hung up the phone. I'm like, oh, I didn't know what's so this goes on. It's like 3 or 4 months later. Well, he comes to visit. He did visits every now and then. He was like, hey, by the way, your numbers are still not reporting correctly. You're showing up like, 80, 90% year over year. I said, no, the numbers are right. He goes, well, how can that be? So I tell him what I did. Loses it. I mean, every customer, what the hell do you think you're doing? You don't have the authority to do this. Da, 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 da. So not being the sharpest individual, at one point he goes, I never would have let you do this. And I said, well, that's why I didn't tell you, which by the way, set him off for another 5 minutes. So amazingly, I did stay somewhat calm. He's yelling. Finally, he takes a breath. I said, Mike, let me ask you a question. Aren't you bonus on like growth year over year? He's like, yes, I am. This conversation never happened. He walks out the door. So now I'm continuing. I'm doing lunch and dinner in the hotel and breakfast in the restaurant. Perkins at the time had like 400 restaurants. We were ranked, they would rank them. You get these internal reports how you're ranked within the organization. We were ranked like number 360 out of 400 because Gettysburg it's a seasonal market. Had a
I've
good
been
summer,
there.
but that's about it. Right?
Yeah, there's not much going on.
We went from like number 360 to number 3. Like, so we went all the way up in the top for revenue, but of course it's helping them every day. I'm punching in 50 lunches at $28 and 50 dinners at $44 or whatever it was. So meanwhile, I'm meeting with the general manager of the hotel every week, right? Because I'm all over this thing. I mean, I fought to get it. Like every day I'm, make sure the setup is right. Does the food look good? And I'm meeting with the GM every week about, menus, counts, all the stuff you would typically need about. Well, I notice as I'm going over there all the time, I'm running around like my hair on fire. I've got like a golf shirt on with like a Perkins logo, like fat grease, and I smell like a restaurant. And like you go in there and it's air conditioned and nice music's playing, and the managers are in suits. They all smell good. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Like this seems like a much better gig than what I have. So one day, just in passing, I say to the GM, I might want to get into the hotel business. And the GM says, well, funny enough, we're actually um, building a hotel here in Gettysburg. I can get you an interview with the owner. I said, that would be great. Now, I can't remember the name of the company, out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They have like 5 hotels, all small, right? So it's not like some large company like a Davidson or something like that. And I remember the owner's name was Denny. But so I remember I borrow my dad's suit. I can only imagine, Oz, what this thing looked like. I'm sure it didn't fit. I got that looked crazy. Which, by the way, to this day, the only interview I've ever done, I don't even know what I'm interviewing for. The GM said, I can get you an interview. I said, okay. Like, I don't know hotels, right? So I go into the suit. I meet him in the boardroom of the hotel. And I sit down. He's sitting across from the table, and he says, my first question for you is, how did you grow revenues 80% year over year? What I didn't know was that he was a minority owner / investor in the restaurant. And so he was getting the quarterly statements, probably also getting distributions, right? Because I had no idea that. I didn't think he'd know anything about the restaurant, but he was getting these quarterly statements, so he knew. So I tell him a little bit less colorful than what I told you. I basically tell him the story of what, what we did. He goes, I'm going to make you my general manager. I was like, whoa. I said, I don't know anything about hotels. By the way, this is an 83-room country inn suite. So it's not some 400-room full-service hotel. But I was like, I don't know anything about hotels. He goes, based on the story you just told me, you'll be just fine. And so that's how I started it. So it's oddly enough, my first job in the hotel business was general manager of this hotel. I was hired while it was being constructed and opened it. And then the rest kind of went from there. Each job led to another job, which led to more responsibility. And I know it's a little bit of a long story. That's basically how I fell into the business, is the honest answer.
I really think we should just end the pod right now. I mean, I'm not sure we can get a better opening and story than that. It was super amazing. You're running like this, like Perkins lunch and dinner cartel there. I don't even know how. I have so many questions about how you're able to buy the different food and how you got this chef on board, like how you did all these things. But the thing my biggest takeaways are, number one, great. It when you see it. We talk a lot about in sports. It in the business world too.
Yeah.
Definitely, you were identified early as a go-getter, and especially as you have more autonomy in a hotel type space, you can pull more things like that off. And when the returns are the returns of the returns, I'm glad those returns worked out the way they did, because there's another parting of this story where you're in a completely different industry. Mike Brady is probably sipping a Mai Tai on some beach right now because of all the bonus checks he got because of you. I actually, we like to hire athletes here. That's a very cliche thing to say, but I also love to hire people who have been in restaurants and bars in our professional environment because of the way that we treat our customer experience, like enlightened hospitality and how we take care of them and create that white glove customer service. I love to take the tenets of that. And I, was a server, started my career in college. Actually, I worked at Bagel Nosh, Bahama Bucks shaved ice, which I got let go of because I was in high school and I was giving my friends too much free shaved ice. Apparently they didn't like that, I guess. And I worked at one other food place that I'm forgetting right now. And that was in high school, but it was kind of like behind retail. Yeah. And I got to college and I wanted to make fast money and I wanted to be a server, and Outback wouldn't hire me as a server. They said, you got to be a bar back or no, a bus boy, much like you started on the dishwashing side. And so I got to tell you, for that 6 months, I was the greatest bus boy in the history of all restaurants. Jumping back, doing whatever I need, breaking my back, lifting heavy plates, doing everything. And they didn't promote me. So I went and put my wares on the market, got hired at a place in Tucson, Arizona called El Paso Barbecue.
Oh, I've been there.
Upscale barbecue. So that was kind of my world.
Yeah.
And I found out that being a server was the perfect job for somebody with a personality like mine. Yeah. I'd still take tenets of that job into what I do right now. Like remember my boss at the time told me my section was like my franchise, and they gave me the food and the menu and the experience. But then whatever I did for our customers and had them coming back, that was up to me. I had to create that.
I love that.
I took that with me. I never expected tips. I went above and beyond to try to earn people's money. And I was never one of those servers that was complaining. Plus, I had a really great time. So I think a lot of my background experience is informed, but we went in two different paths. You stayed in hospitality, and look at you. You joined Davidson about a year ago, one of the premier names in the space. I'm interested. What drew you to the organization?
So I got a call from, here's the other kind of crazy stat with my career. Um, I haven't applied for a job since that GM job. And I guess that technically, even though I didn't apply, it was referral from, like, it's word of mouth. It's a small business. And it's weird because you think about it, there's 65,000 hotels in the US, just in the US. But if you look at the amount, and there's probably 600 to 700 hotel management companies. But if you go by major hotel management companies, you get down to like top 10 or 15, the space becomes a lot smaller. But to answer your question, I was at
Well, I
Remington.
want to stop you right there. I
Yep.
know you're saying it's a very small space. Forget that. If anybody ever tells me, especially if they're a little bit later in their career, that they've never applied for a job and had multiple jobs at big companies, insta hire, because that is the most verifiable proof you have of how good somebody is. People take good people with them
Yep.
and grow them, or they hear about them and they recruit them. So major kudos to
Yeah.
you
No,
on
thank
that.
you.
So, okay, so you didn't apply to Davidson. How'd it come about?
No, so I got a call from a recruiter, and it basically said, "Hey, listen, we've got this opportunity at Davidson for chief operating officer." I'd heard it similarly. I'd heard a lot of incredible things about Davidson, about the organization, which I can tell you over a year in now, all of them are true and then some. And so at the time, I was very happy where I was. At the same time, I recognized, which you're seeing a little bit more now, I can see the stability of the parent company financially wasn't great. Although I thought that was probably 3 to 5 years out. There's been a lot of sales, all this is public. There's been a lot of sales now that they've sold a lot of hotels in the last year. So I look back and go, my timing was actually really good. But that was in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, if something really good comes along, I should at least talk about or consider it, right? So I wasn't out looking for a job and applying, but I get a call from this recruiter and they say Davidson. I was like, wow, that would be at the top of my list. So I was like, I certainly want to learn more about it. And so that started some conversations with some people here, mainly Tom Goucher, the CEO here. We met, I think, I want to say it was in June. So I got the call. I can tell you, so I got the call from the recruiter December of 2024. I started July 7th of 2025. So that process took, 6, 7 months total. But yeah, I mean, it was really all about the reputation I'd heard. And then it was one of those things where the more conversation I had and the more I learned about the company, the more I wanted to be a part of it, because
Well,
I
here's
felt
what I
like
want to
where
ask
I
you about
was
this.
and where they were was a really good match.
This is what interests me when you come in as a COO. I mean, you are literally responsible for the lifeblood of these restaurants, of these hotels, of these event centers. And Davidson has like multiple different types, right?
Yeah.
Of different things. So, like, how do you even go about getting into the weeds and learning? It's like, what does the first like 3, 6 months look like? Are you going on the listening tour? Are you diving into, processes and financials? Are you like figuring out the talent? Like, what's kind of the first step of trying to get your head around such a massive role?
Yeah. So I would tell you my first 3 months, what I've learned, and it's the benefit. This is my third. I think it's the timing is right, and that this is my third time I've been a COO, right, at both Magna and Remington. So I have a little bit of experience doing the job. So part of it was I leaned a little bit on what I'd learned before. But to answer your question, the first thing I did was I went out and saw hotels. You can't learn how to manage a business from a glass office that I'm talking to you today. You have to get out, meet the people, and understand it. And so the very first thing that I did was go out and meet people. And yeah, I did a lot of listening. I also kind of looked at where there was opportunities for improvement. Like I'll tell you one right off the bat. The three verticals you mentioned, pivot, hotels, resorts, right? Those are our three verticals. I can tease we're launching a fourth vertical later this year, which we can share maybe later. But those are our three verticals. And then we have Davidson Restaurant Group that supports all the restaurant and bars under the whole platform. What I noticed was those three verticals all operated slightly differently. So it was almost like internally we were running three different companies, but we're one company.
Mhm.
So a lot of what I did was when I would listen and then hear things, like, wait. If we're doing something that's a best practice in resorts, doesn't matter the hotel. We should also be doing that in hotels, and we should be doing that in pivot. If it's something that makes sense and it's good, why wouldn't we do that? So one of the first things I focused on was bringing the company together, still keeping the team separate, the vertical separate, because listen, if I'm a hotel owner and I have an autograph hotel, I like the fact that I've got pivot, that everyone who works there specializes in lifestyle hotels. So it was important to keep the actual vertical's separate, but internally it should feel the same. So one of the first things I did was get people more on the same page and really adopt a lot of those best practices as company practices, not just single vertical practices.
That makes total sense to me. I love that. That's a I wouldn't say low hanging fruit, but that's an
No,
easy win.
it
And
was
yeah,
low
if it's
hanging fruit.
working here, and they're not like, retail and I don't know, biology, right? Like in biosciences, like there's different there's things that you can drive synergies on. So that makes a ton of sense to me. Another question I have is what is the what are the fires that get up to your level at the COO? Because I can imagine what happens at a hotel or a resort or an individual restaurant and things like that. What are the things that when you get the phone call at like 2 a.m. they're getting to you, they're escalating? What does that look like?
So there's a lot of different things that can cause, as you can imagine, life happens in hotels, right? It's one of the few industries where every generation works there, every generation stays there. So life happens, right? People stay in hotels because they're visiting a funeral. People stay in hotels because they're getting married. People stay in hotels because it's got promoted or they're on vacation. There's all kinds of things that happen. So some of the things I get calls for are the things that you wouldn't really think about, but they're tragedies, really bad things that have happened. Someone commits suicide or whatever. There's just things that happen in hotels that happen in life. Another comment would be if we've got a resort that does $80 million a year, and we do forecasts every month, and there's a forecast drop of $2 or $3 million, and the owner's concerned, might get a call about that. I'll also get calls about some really good stuff too, like, hey, just want to thank you for promoting this person, or hey, I want you to come and recognize this. So yeah, it just depends on the day. One of the things I love most about this job is no day is the exact same. But usually, to your point, if it's gotten to be, I would like to say everything's sunshine and roses, but a lot of times it's because something went wrong and we got to fix it, right? That's just the reality.
No jobs are all sunshine and roses,
Yeah,
particularly when you get up to leadership, right? And I know this is a kid's podcast, as you said earlier. A part of the job is eating shit and smiling in
that's
some of
right.
these jobs and not complaining about it, right?
That's
So
right.
I'm totally with you on that. Let's talk about culture because that's something that I think you're very passionate about. You obviously worked with Magna and Remington. I'm sure you had some real thoughts on culture there. Interested, how would you describe the culture at Davidson? Both like when you walked in, but also like if it's evolved at all over the past year with your getting into the organization.
Finding the right talent for your team doesn't have to be a struggle. Meet Aon Hire, the world's first hiring experience management platform designed to transform the way you hire. Powered by AI, Aon Hire takes the hassle out of every step in the process. From smart resume analysis to customized interview questions, it saves you time, money, and effort. Plus, with real-time insights from every interview, you can quickly identify top candidates, reduce turnover, and stay on budget. And forget about note-taking, Aon Hire takes care of that for you. Ready to revolutionize your hiring process? Visit aonhire.com and get started today.
I will say that the culture at Davidson is probably the best I've seen. It's best in class. There's 7 core values that Davidson has. Serve others with love. There's a lot of things and you see it permeate throughout the organization. There's just people who really care. Going back to the founder was the no asshole rule, right? Yeah, we're stressed. We have people, but people generally care about each other, respect each other. And it's just a really, really talented group of people that work here. I will tell you that one of the things that I changed in the last year, I think I recognized, one of my favorite phrases is culture and accountability are not mutually exclusive. You need
Mm,
one for the other. So
mm.
I would almost argue that at times, maybe before I joined, maybe we held on to people too long, people who had become underperformers or who weren't doing it just because they've been with us for a long time. And I'm not trying to sound cold and heartless. I am a people, employee first type of person, but sometimes people are just in the wrong roles or it's not the right fit. So I think one of the things we've done is brought a little more accountability to performance and making sure that we've got the right people in the right place. I, you know, I firmly believe that if you think about organizations and how they make decisions, a lot of times the person the furthest from the issue is making the decision. So as an example, if we're talking about something that affects our general managers, and I think you mentioned this earlier, we stood up a GM council. That's one of the things we formed in the last year to talk about, listen, before we roll out all these things to the field, how does it affect the actual field? Why should we make that decision from a corporate office? It should be made in part with the leaders who are actually going to have to institute it and run with it. So I think so much of culture is, it doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. So it,
Mm.
it should be a part of who you are, but it should also be a part of what you bring to the organization. It's not just like you're watching culture on TV. You're contributing to it. Everyone's a part of what that culture becomes.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So I got a similar line, and I went through this myself and saw it firsthand. I'm glad to tell you, survived and got to the other end and been better for it. Also a very people first leader. So much so that it was probably a big part of my identity. And sometimes anything, you can have too much of anything and it not be a good thing. And so the line that I remember from this 2022, 2023 timeline was empowerment without accountability leads to entitlement. And that is certainly the case. So like this idea of like hire adults, treat them like that's empower them, let them do their thing. If you don't have accountability measures, if you don't have an idea of what great looks like, and you have people striving to do that, and you have all the structures around that, you're going to be in trouble. And the other thing that I'd like to point out is like, listen, when we talk about culture, a lot of the time, as a guy who's like spent a lot of time in HR and has a lot of great HR contacts and probably is an HR leader in a lot of ways himself, it's not HR's responsibility. Like HR can be there to codify it. They can be there to kind of help with the messaging. Certainly how we develop, train, retain, attract people falls under the purview of HR, right? Although I would say it falls to the purview of all managers in the organization, but you get what I mean. But ultimately, I believe that, especially in a hospitality organization, you are probably the culture carrier of the organization. And so I'm just interested, do you agree with that sentiment? It's obviously everybody's responsibility, but do you feel an extra burden to kind of set that? Because I have to imagine, we're going to talk about this in a minute on how you kind of enable this throughout in a hospitality organization. I have to imagine that you feel the pressure to make sure that the housekeeping or the bartender or the front desk or the concierge, like they are the ones that are leading the charge at the front of being in front of the guests, and you are the CEO. That kind of indirectly is all your world, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I would say, well, you just reminded me of one of my favorite phrases: pressure is a privilege. I don't, I'm not going to say I don't feel pressure and stress. That would be a lie, right? I think we all do at times. However, I will say that I feel incredibly grateful and humbled to be in the role that I'm in. We were just talking about, like, even though you're talking about my life, I'm hearing you talk about a dishwasher for Perkins, this role, and I still can't believe it. And it's my freaking life, right? So it's like, how is that even possible? Well, it's possible because you do one thing at a time, and that one thing leads to one thing, which leads to one thing, which leads to one thing, right? So one of my favorite parts of my job is the ability to influence and see sometimes something in someone before they see it in themselves. And so, and that, I would tell you that one of the biggest contributors of culture is to promoting from within, allowing people to do more in the organization, because that does several things. One is it shows trust in someone who may not even know if they can do the job yet, but it also then opens up a job for then someone else. So it becomes this promotion from within aligns with where it can happen 5 or 6 times versus just one time. To answer your question though, because you said, I do believe that. I do believe that similar, like, sales is not just the sales department. Everyone is in sales. Culture is the primary champion. If you go to a hotel, and we talked about Davidson culture, right? So if you go to a Davidson hotel that's being managed, let's pick one, the Don Cesar in St. Pete Beach, right? The culture that housekeeper feels has nothing to do with this corporate office. It has everything to do with that general manager and the leadership on site and how they feel it. So culture to that housekeeper would be the leadership of the Don Cesar, not what's happening in the corporate office. Now, what our job at the corporate office is to make sure that what we're talking about, the leadership what the field feels, and then they pass it down as well, right? So culture is one of those things that we're all responsible for. But ultimately, if we can lead, inspire, and motivate and enhance in a positive way, that's going to lead the culture to become even better than before.
love it. There's a lot of ways that we describe culture. One of the things that I like to say is like, it's not what we say, it's our actions, particularly when management's not around. It's how we handle different situations that get put at the front feet of any employee in the organization, and how they go about handling it. What do they do when the light's not on you, right? Like that a lot of times is what your actual culture is. And so to me, you do have a lot of control in that. Culture is around incentives and what you reward, right? Processes, okay? How you hire, who you hire, right? And then to your point, how you develop and retain them throughout the organization if they're going to grow within the organization. And then even like the physical space and the environment, and like that plays a part in it too. So like, I'm just interested, like, what are the switches available to you? Can you give us some examples of some of those that you have that you think can make a big move on culture? Maybe not today, but when implemented and done effectively over time.
No, I can give you a couple examples just from since I've been here. So let's start with incentive or bonus plans. When I joined, the bonus plan for the general managers and operating team was incredibly complex. It was, what they call, there are all these gates or fences around things. Like, you earned it, but if you don't do this, you don't get it. Or you don't do this. It was like 5 pages long, to the point where I was like, I need a lawyer and a dictionary to even understand if I've earned a bonus or not. So one of the first things we did is we simplified the bonus plan. We identified what does success look like, to your point. We have 6 pillars of performance that we measure in all of our hotels. And guess what? You're bonused on each of those 6 things. There's only one gatekeeper. You got to at least hit 90% of budgeted GOP, gross operating profit. You can't ask for nobody to write bonus checks if it's a terrible year. So you set that one gate. Here's the pillars, and then what we did was.
By the way, I just want to say one thing to that real quickly, and this is something that also I work with and advise people on. If you only have it be individual performance and don't tie it to a bigger collective goal, that also feeds your culture in not a great way. So go ahead.
But it's super simple. So any GM, any person can go look at their P&L and say, I know exactly where I'm at today. But then we had what we call, there's these certain parts where, let's say, I'll give you an example. One of the pillars of performance is 50% flow through, which basically means flow or flex. So if you're up $1,000 in GOP to budget, you need to be up at least $500 to the profit line, and it works in reverse. If you're down $1,000, you got to save $500. It's part of expense management. So that's one of our pillars, right? But we have an incentive. If you get to 55%, you get a little bit more. So it basically motivates the right behavior, and it models that. We have 7 operating goals this year. Guess what 6 of them are? The pillars of performance. And the 7th one is promoting from within, right? So everything makes sense. So you've got your goals, you've got your bonus plan. Everything kind of ties as is complementary to each other. One of the specific examples I'll give you that you mentioned, when I go to hotels, I always like to go through the back of the house areas too, not just the front. And I won't say it's my pet peeve, but one of the things I always notice is typically when you go to the employee break room, what you'll commonly see is what I call a history of the hotel. You've got banquet chairs in there from 25 years ago, and they replaced the banquet chairs. You've got probably odds and ends tables that have come from all throughout the hotel when they were chipped or broken. You've got this basically just a collection of just crap. So what I always say is, what does this say to the person who's sitting down to have lunch? It's not that much money. Go to IKEA, but get furniture intentional for the room that you have it. It all matches. It all makes sense. And then when the person comes in to sit down for their break, they have something that feels good. You got a nice TV on the wall. Like, be intentional about certain things that matter, right? So, because basically, if you're saying the break room is just a collection of crap that we really can't use anymore, there's another message there that you're saying, but you're not saying. You're saying it non-verbally.
I love that. I'll give you an example from my own company. So I go, and I'm obviously got to be the face of the business. I'm doing some software stuff. But I'm involved. Don't get me wrong. My CRO would not tell you that I'm a hands-off CEO. But he's running the primary aspect of the business. But there's one thing that through the history of our company and the whole 16 years we've been around, that I've owned and I will always continue to own. And we have a Monday morning meeting with the entire organization, okay, to kind of get set for the week. Yeah. And this is why I think that's important, is that my voice, my ability to talk to the company, to tell them about the things, to spend time. So here, let me walk you through what we do, and I'll tell you why all this is intentional. First thing is checking in. Hey, you just had, a holiday, your birthday. How was it? Hey, you went away on a trip. How was that? What's going on for you this weekend? Did you watch the World Cup? Did you do this? Are you celebrating the Knicks? Whatever it is, I'll intentionally pick some people and talk to them, kind of get everybody chatting and getting everybody going, okay? Mm-hmm. In the email I send out, I put pictures for everybody of different things that or themes and that we're thinking about, and I put a Monday motivation quote. That's a business quote in there. We go ahead and then we do org announcements so we can share across the organization. We have our CRO talk about things from a financial perspective. That's a very intentional thing. Then we move into what we call recognition. And basically, it's people putting up their hand and saying, hey, this past week, this person helped me do this. Yeah. And they have to tie it back to one or multiple of the company values. Yeah. This is about not just what I did. It's about the people that helped me do what I did. And then we've also been recently implementing, let's name a team right now that's really killing it and coming together to do these things to bring collaboration into the fold. Then we have all the people that we got offers for, contract and full-time, and it's usually a pretty big list, okay? And we put their faces next to it, okay? And so now when you go and you look at all the people that just got new jobs because of MSH and our team, we're putting real people's faces behind it. So that's not looked at as an invoice or a commission. We're putting real people to work. And that's what matters. Okay.
Yeah.
Then we'll go through and talk about the people that recently started. And I make our recruiters who did the placement give us a fun fact about the person that's outside of the scope of what's on their resume. Okay. So that we can know something about the person and really get personally deep with people rather than just throw them a resume, get a job, do whatever it may be. And then we always close out, right, with the ultimate reading of the Monday motivation. We typically have one person that does it most of the time. What does this mean to you? Set the team off, get done in 30 minutes, and we get going. Now, all of that stuff has been done with the word that you said, intention, and what we want for our company and what we want for our culture. And you know what? I'm sure there's some people that roll their eyes at, oh, Monday morning, here we go again. I haven't even had my coffee yet. But I think genuinely people look forward to it and it becomes the thing that sets off our company. And that's just one small thing that we try to do to be intentional about culture. So what I want to tell you is fantastic work with everything you did. This is one of the better culture conversations I've ever had because we're talking about the real things in practice, like incentive and process and the things that we do that lead to the outcomes we want. So man, I appreciate you sharing that, but we got to get to hiring. We got to talk about what pays the bills here at the old Hire Learning Podcast. And I know you've done a lot of hiring in your history and your career.
Right.
So you can think about this for your direct team in corporate. You can think about this in terms of people that you want to hire for your hotels. But let's start here. What's one hiring opinion that you have that most leaders would disagree with?
So I think, I don't know if most leaders would, but I always look at, depends on what I'm hiring for, but personality, charisma, how you're made up, depending on what the job is more important to me than experience. Because experience does matter. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we just, oh, who cares? It doesn't matter what you've done. But this is where I would lean more on, again, it depends on the job. But the question is what you're hiring for, what is the personality makeup of that person? And is it the right fit for what you're asking them to do? Because I've seen several examples where I'll give you an example. This is when I was at Magna. We hired a person who was on the new business team. If you looked at the resume, they were probably overqualified. The places they'd worked, places they'd done, but this was an introverted person who wasn't comfortable going into a room with people that they didn't know. And you could just see it. It was like, as good as they are, I don't know that that's the right fit. And I ended up recommending someone with a lot less experience, but incredibly charismatic, willing to learn, hungry. And, who knows, because we ended up hiring the person I just described, but they were incredibly successful because I think we put them in the right role. And a lot of times, almost like use your sports analogy, we're almost like coaches. It's not that someone has the wrong skill. The question is, are you putting the right skill in the right position, right? And a lot of that is looking at it in terms of how will that fit for that role. So, that's one of the things
I love that. I think a lot of people tend to lean on pedigree and resume and experience. But we can also see how your past informs your current state and future. That line cook give you the opportunity to go on the fry line. The hotel owner gave you the opportunity, the general manager. Right. If it worked for you and you're good at identifying that charisma, that personality, and that fit, it's going to work for others. So I love that. All right. What about this? Do you have an interview question that everyone should steal? Interested to know what that might be and then maybe what type of answer you're looking for.
So I would say one of my favorite ones and this is going to lean back to some of the stuff you said. By the way, I loved what you're talking about that you do on Monday mornings. I emulate a lot of that similar stuff, and some formats are the same, some are different. But one of my favorite interview questions is going to sound funny because it's nothing to do with the job at all. What do you like to do in your free time?
What are you looking for when you hear that?
Yeah, what do you like to do in your free time?
What's the construct of a good answer?
What that leads to is their interests, and that usually leads to a couple follow-up questions. It gives me a chance to get to know the person beyond the job that we're talking about. So it's one of my favorite questions because I think it's a window into what do they like to do, what do they enjoy. I remember I asked that. There was this candidate. I was like, this is the candidate, right? But the role was a VP of Ops role, and it was probably 75% of the time on the road. And I asked him, what do you do? What do you enjoy to do in your free time? And he goes, I love being at home with my family. He goes, this is my favorite thing and he talked about, and all of his answers were like spot on. And I was like, I said, how often have you traveled before? He's like, well, I really haven't, but I think I can make this work. And I'm like, this probably isn't the right, you know what I mean? It's like, because you gotta, you got to be in it. You got to feel it. So
Yeah, it's the type of thing that you might think you want, and then you get there, and when you told me, you told me what your priority was, and your shop's not gonna be able to give you that priority. So you probably saved that guy
yeah, for
a
sure.
marriage,
But I'll tell you
maybe.
what else is really cool about that question. And I tend to remember stuff when I have conversations with people. Like, so there was this general manager who had this. It was this funky collection. It was like Christmas snow globes or something. It was like his answer was he enjoyed collecting these snow globes. And I was at the property probably 9 months later doing a property tour, and he came out. He was showing us around, and at the end I said, "By the way, have you had any new snow globes to your collection?" He was like, "How do you know?" I'm like, "I asked you that during the interview." He goes, "Oh my gosh, I've never had anyone like." He was just blown away by the fact that you remembering one of those personal details. So one of the things I like about that question too is when you hire someone, you kind of put it in the bank about what they like, and then when you're talking to them, you're not just asking business, kind of like what you're talking about. You talk about some personal stuff. What's new in your life? How's that going? It gives you information you can follow up with down the road.
Can you think of a red flag in an interview that you missed? Like you've named a couple of times where you caught him. Can you think of one where you missed and you came back to be like, never again will I let that get
Yeah,
past? Or is there any type of themes when you miss? Maybe.
I think a red flag I missed one time was the resume looked great, a lot of really good companies, but when I went back, it didn't end up working out. Less than 6 months on the job, and because I did that, I was like, "What did I miss here?" And I actually went back and looked at my interview notes, and I went back and looked at the resume, and what I noticed were the last 4 jobs were all under 2 years of employment. So I think a red flag can be you can't just look at the name or where it's worked. Is that if it's a churn, and one of the jobs was like 9 months. Listen, I get it. Not everything's a good fit. I'm not saying if you work at a job for less than a year, that means you're a bad person or you're not. But if you see a pattern of that, or in 8 years they worked at 5 jobs, it can be a red flag in terms of they're just waiting for the next best thing, and how much are they really going to put into it?
Here's what I advise people on that, because I've seen a lot of people just disqualify somebody immediately when they see 2 jobs in 3 years or something like that. It's a heuristic for a reason. There's usually something there when it's happened multiple times. If you're telling me 4 and 5 years or something like that, that's an extreme red flag. What I tell people to do though is go in with an open mind and ask the story behind the moves,
100%.
and then see if there's a theme behind the answers. A lot of times, if people are constantly playing the victim, or this happened, that's one thing. I know some people that 2008, 2009, right? It was tough. I know some people that had contract jobs, didn't properly list them on the resume, and they did a great job in the project, but then the project didn't go on beyond, and then it looks like something different on their resume.
Yeah.
I know people that took a sabbatical, or wanted to stay home with family, or things like that. So to me, it's a good. I better ask about this, but I think it's important to ask, because sometimes you're gonna find out and be surprised that actually the answer is reasonable.
Oh, I agree completely. Sometimes, actually, that's happened. There was another time where it was someone who was only with the job 6 months, and I asked what happened, and it was they were having issues with their child, and they decided to stay home and get them back on track. And then I was like, "Well,
that's. I
that
mean, there's
actually
no
makes
better
me
reason
think
than that,
more of
right?
you,
We
not
all would do
less,"
the same
right?
thing.
Yeah.
100%. All right. I know you got to have a good answer for this one. Craziest interview you've ever been a part of on either side of the table.
Oh man, craziest interview. Well, I would say, I mean, I could actually probably qualify that interview I described was pretty nuts when I walked in, not knowing
For sure.
what I was even interviewing for. But I'll try to give you one from the other side. I can give it to you. So this is for a GM job in New York City, and we're sitting down, just kind of going through it, and I started asking about, because I noticed there was a gap. I said, "Hey, I noticed, your last job looks like you hadn't worked like the last 9 months, 11 months." And he goes, without even like flinching, he goes, "Oh yeah, I was in jail." I said, "Oh." Like, was it? He goes, "No, I did something I shouldn't have done. I don't really want to talk about it, but I was, and I was like, "Oh, okay." He goes, "Yeah, you think I would have learned the first time I went in."
Oh my
And I'm just
goodness.
like,
I got to give the guy credit, because I've seen a lot of people interview and then they get to the background check thinking they're going to sneak by, and it doesn't happen. At least he was being upfront about it.
he was, but
But I
honestly,
don't know, man. That's a big job,
I was looking
multiple
around
time
like,
felon.
am I on candid camera? Like, what the hell? Like, what is going on?
Oh man. That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that. All right, last one. What's the hardest role you've ever had to fill? What made it so brutal?
Hardest role I've ever had to fill would probably be a general manager of a very tertiary market. Like, it's a hard place to live. So we have 12 hotels in the Keys. And I will tell you, and some are beautiful resorts. The Keys are
Isla
hard.
Morada, where at?
The Florida Keys. So
No, I know. I go down there all the time. I'm trying to figure out.
so we have I think 6 in Key West. We've got about 4 in the Middle Keys. Yeah, we're kind of all over the Keys.
I
But
love it.
I don't know if this is the hard. Well, actually, no. I'll take it back. Probably the hardest one. The Keys are generally hard if you're looking for like a general manager, just because not everyone wants to live there.
Not many people live there, right?
It's hard to get them to move.
Depending on how deep you get, you can't drive in from Miami either. So you're living in the Keys.
100%. And by the way, the cost of living side, so that's a tough market to get into for sure. But probably the hardest one I would say was this was with Davidson, but we had a small little property. It was about 2.5 hours north of Boston. It was a little independent, the kind of bed and breakfast, 35 room thing. And it was just out in the middle of nowhere. And like the last hour was like nothing but wilderness, like trying to find someone, the closest town had like, I don't know, 1,800 people. It's just one of those really remote
Location.
Yeah.
Difficult. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. It wasn't the Overlook Hotel in Colorado, right?
It was not.
Okay. I just want to make sure. That one has some history, so I don't know. All right. I want to ask you, is there a use case that you use artificial intelligence, because everybody's talking about it personally, that like you're like, I love this. This is made whether it be a health thing, whether it be a cooking thing, whether it be a room design thing, anything?
So I'll tell you what I've been using it for lately. I've been on this kind of this protein kick, like trying to make sure. So I'll go on to like ChatGPT and like, how many grams of protein are in? And it's like, man, this thing gets it to you right away. And I'm just like, wow, okay. So even specific to like, I had Shake Shack the other day at the airport, right? So I had the Shack burger. Like, how many grams of protein are in the Shack burger? And it's like, oh, it's this many. And if you had fries, it's another 5 grams. It's like, wow, this is pretty cool. The other thing I'll use it for sometimes is if I'm typing like a really long email, not like every email, but if it's an email and there's formatting, I'll sometimes copy and paste it, and then I'll still use my own language, but sometimes like, oh, you know what?
Ask it to condense it, bullet point.
Yeah,
No, you
like-
should do that, because sometimes like you're writing out a long narrative and missive, and it's like, I need some writing coaching right now to make sure I
Seriously.
get my point across.
And I'll
right?
read what they have, what the AI has. I'm like, wow, that does say it better than what I said. I was like running on or saying the same word 3 times or whatever.
All right, I got an app for you. You're going to like this because I'm on a similar kick. It's called Yuka. And so Yuka, you go ahead, YUKA. Somebody put me onto this.
Okay.
And I go to Costco every weekend and, I'm trying to buy food. I got 4 kids. So I'm pretty much feeding an army at all times. And you go and you can scan the barcode on any food and it will tell you everything, worth eating, not worth eating, protein content, sodium content, additives, everything. I just changed your life, Jason. You're going to write me. You're going to text me, say, Oz, I'm like, body fat 10%. I got huge protein gains. Yuka's going to help you big time, man.
I wrote it
love
down.
it.
I wrote down Yuka. I will look that
Try
up.
it out. Trust me on that. Okay. Let's ask about, in the last year, book, movie, podcast that changed the way you think. Anything come to mind?
I would say probably the one that I really enjoyed. And I'd like to tell you, my last name's a reader. You'd think I'd read a lot more.
I was going to say, we have to hype you up. You're a reader. You gotta have a
you
good
would
answer.
think so. And I used to read a lot when I was younger. I don't read as much, but I read. This isn't like even a newer book. But have you read the book Shoe Dog about the Nike Power?
That's probably one of my favorite biographies.
Same.
There's a lot of reasons why I love that book, but the way it takes you up right into, because I read it thinking like I'm gonna get to the Michael Jordan stuff. This is gonna be so exciting. That might be like the epilogue. It's really about the construction of the company. And I went through some issues at the beginning of my company with partners and things like that. And reading that, like, really kind of like, and then he went on to go have this tremendous success. And the way he writes it, right? It's like this like stressful, terrible time in his life. And then he goes on to have this amazing success. And I remember reading that at the time and needing to read that and be like, oh, this is just a chapter 1 or 2 of my book. There's so much more to come. And I needed that at that moment. Great book.
Exact same. So that's what came to mind is Shoe Dog. I just read that, I think probably, I don't know, a year or so ago. And it was like, wow, it hit me at the right
One of my favorite biographies. If you all haven't read it, check it out. You gotta read it. Audiobook, also really good. Okay, last question, and then I do have a lightning round for you. What is some advice you'd give 20-year-old Jason that you didn't know then, but that you know now?
Well, probably the first thing I would say is that just believe in yourself a little bit more. I mean, as a 20-year-old, I was a pretty unconfident kid. I won't get into it.
Wait. Hold on. The guy who took on his own brand a business with the neighboring hotel and brought 80% year-over-year returns for Perkins at lunch and dinner? You didn't believe in yourself?
So Oz, you said when I was 20. So I didn't go into this whole story. At 20 years old, I'll give you a short answer here, but basically my mom passed away when I was in high school. So I had a few years there where I was kind of like, I don't want to say lost, but I didn't really have it all together. And there was a moment in time of my life, and actually shortly before this happened, it was actually when I was still a dishwasher, where I was just kind of lagging along. I wasn't even a very, very good dishwasher. And finally, I just came up with this thing. You know what? I'm going to do really well at whatever I'm doing. Whatever I'm doing, I'm just going to be the best at. I'm not going to half-ass anything. And that's honestly when I started kicking ass and taking names. And that's when doors opened, because I made them open versus just being the victim of, oh, woe is me, something bad happened, I'm just going to play that card. But yeah, I would just say learning that even a little bit faster in my life, I would have taken.
I love that. I similar, right? I was talented in different ways. Like I could take tests without having to study really hard. I could show up and crush the presentation. And then I realized hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. And so when I got into the workforce and I realized that, a lot of people with great degrees, a lot of people have accomplished way more than me. The only thing I can control is my effort and what I put into things. And that became kind of my driving force. And then my career took off from that point. Is no half measures. Like this is it. This is the time right now. You got to run.
That's exactly right.
I got some great lightning. I think they're great. I'm going to ask you, we're going to start here. What meal at Perkins did you eat most often when you were working there?
So I make a custom. So I would take a bread bowl salad, and I'd take chicken strips and cut them up, and I'd put honey mustard dressing on it. It was my favorite meal. Oh, and by the way,
carb loading. I love that. Sounds delicious.
To this day, I will tell you, just like your Yuka app for me, do yourself a favor and have some honey mustard dressing from Perkins. To this day, it's the best honey mustard dressing I've ever had.
At Perkins? Okay, I love that.
Good stuff.
What's one of the perks that we wouldn't know about being COO of a big hospitality company?
You get to do some stuff that's pretty cool. Like, I got to go to the Masters tournament last year. You get invited to a few things that you wouldn't even normally know existed. Like, wow, that's pretty cool. And not even just going and sitting in the stands. You get some access to some stuff that you wouldn't normally get to do. It's pretty cool.
I love that. All right, what was the best thing you had at the Masters to eat?
Oh, that's easy. Pimento cheese sandwich.
I was gonna say, I've never been. The minute I get an opportunity, I'm going. I'm buying 10 of those things. Love me some pimento cheese. I love that. Okay, what is the best hotel experience you've had? Can't say Davidson. Like, where have you gone and you just had an incredible hotel experience?
Yeah, so I would say the one and only in Cape Town, South Africa was phenomenal.
What about it? What made it so great?
It was really the people. It starts with the people. When you first enter, the way they just made you feel welcome and talk, and then of course the product itself is beautiful. It overlooked these mountains and waters. The food was phenomenal. The entire vibe there was spot on. It was a great experience. If you're ever in Cape Town, South Africa, check out the one and only. It was fantastic.
Okay, what's your favorite restaurant in Atlanta?
Ooh. That's a good question, because I just moved to Atlanta a couple months ago.
So you're new. Okay.
I'm going to throw you a curveball, though, because I love pizza. Carlos Pizza. It's a New York style pizzeria. It was started by actually a father. 2 brothers run it now. It's in the burbs, but I found Carlos Pizza to be excellent.
I'm coming to Atlanta. I got a lot of clients up there. You and I are going to get some Carlos Pizza. All right, last one.
Done.
What's a little thing that you love when a restaurant gets it right?
This is going to sound pretty funny too, but I love me a gin and tonic. And this is going to
So when you got a restaurant that puts together, so what is it? Is it like equal parts gin and tonic? Is it the lime?
No,
is it the type of gin they use?
I usually order a Hendrick's gin and tonic with 2 lime. You'd be surprised how many times it comes out with only 1 lime. I'm going to say it's at least 50% of the time, if not more. If I get a Hendrick's gin and tonic with 2 lime and it comes out with 2 lime, I'm like, wow, they heard me say 2 lime.
All right. Jason, I don't even know that I needed to hear the last part to know that you're my kind of guy. We like a lot of the same things. We have a similar mentality when it comes to work. Love a good gin and tonic every once in a while, man. We're going to get one together soon. Jason, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for sharing everything. Amazing, amazing stuff on culture. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you, Oz. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.